Started. Hello, everybody. You're watching Kamai Kamai. My name is Martin Lejeski. We have a great show in store for you, and I'm very happy. I'm very glad to welcome you to bring to you the second episode of the show. And today we're going to be talking about stories. We're going to be talking about storytelling in video games and how stories are told in a unique way in video games as opposed to other media. So, but first, we're gonna get into the vegetable portion of the show, and always remember, eat your vegetables. Now, we're gonna be, but before we move to that, I'd like to just do a little bit of a recap of the previous episode. We talked about video games, what video games were, we defined video games, and we explained why definitions are important. So it was my first time doing it, and it was a really interesting experience. So I think that it's also an interesting thing to note how you can sort of see a documentation of a guy who's doing something for the first time and who had never done it before, and is just learning the process, and how I was super nervous the first time, but now I gotta say I don't feel nervous at all. I just feel like I don't know. I feel normal just talking. Another thing that's changed is I had glasses now. Last time I was squinting a lot, and I had a hard time looking at the chat. But this time we got glasses on, and it's gonna go smoothly. And right, so that's it for our vegetable portion. Now let's move on to the main event. So today we're going to be talking about stories. That's sort of my element. That's my area of expertise, and because for those of you who don't know, I am a writer for the game Sonder. I'm writing the dialogue and some of the story. Well, we'll see what exactly I will have contributed to the game in the story department, but yeah, so that is my area of interest, my area of expertise, and maybe in the future we're going to be talking a little bit more about stories in other media or just stories in general. And today we're going to be focusing on video game stories and how they're unique in how stories are uniquely told in video games as opposed to other media. So, what is a story? A story is a telling or retelling of an event. And I would say this is the prototypical story. The reason I say prototypical story is because this is a story that is sort of naturally evolved. It is the natural state of the human being. So if you were to examine humans from a biological perspective, and you look at how stories evolved, what their biological function is, that's the definition that you'll sort of come to. And also, what is the purpose of stories? The purpose is to meet and fulfill the biological functions or purposes. And we can do a whole separate show about that, about what that means, what that entails. But for now, we're going to be talking a bit of a bit more colloquially about such things. And the reason why this is important, this having a sort of a definition and looking at stories from a sort of historical, biological perspective. Well, one of the reasons is because uh, stories, or rather, uh, every medium is liable uh, to sort of subversion and the capacity to be undermined by whatever elements in society, or whatever individuals that seek to do it. And specifically, the um, the way in which we, I hope you can hear me properly because there are people talking a bit in the background, but that's fine. So the reason why we have these definitions is so that we can sort of separate the medium and uh, control our creation, control our communication, have a more clear and concise way of doing things. So some would say, well, why do you want to have such a strict definition? Well, you are too limiting. You are too constricting. And I would say to that, well, if you have a vase and the vase is the medium and the content is the water, so you're saying, well, the vase is too limiting. And okay, so yes, that's the point. And if you poke a hole in the vase, the water will flow out, but it's no longer a vase. It's no longer that thing. So what's happened is that some media is sort of, for example, into let's take a look at poetry. Poetry used to be this incredibly strict medium, this incredibly strict genre of literature, and people wrote entire treatises or entire papers about what it meant to be a poet, what it meant to write poetry, and excuse me, and they had a very, very specific way of doing things for a very long time. And then people started advocating for this. Well, anything can be poetry. Poetry is about expressing yourself. And I think that's the core, probably the core of the issue, is that people make this claim that art is just about expressing yourself. Poetry is about expressing yourself. But no, that's not true. It's not about expressing yourself. It is about meeting its the biological purposes and functions that it entails. So, what happened with poetry was that free verse got initiated. People started saying, "Well, these verses, their rhymes, they're too constricting, they're too limiting, and we need to have this, uh, we need to have freedom in writing." And and so slowly they've strayed from this sort of stuff, and they've transferred to what they call now free verse. And now poetry has become a sort of a, I don't know, it's like a parody of itself in a way, because people don't really, it's not, it doesn't have the same oomph that it doesn't have the same authority. And that's in my view because people started seeing it as a sort of a way to express themselves, as opposed to something that would benefit the their sort of their neighbors or the people reading it, or they stopped valuing it in and of itself, because that's what the people of the past did. You have to understand, these people were zealots. They were fanatics about this stuff. For example, Sir Philip Sidney wrote an entire paper on poetry called An Apology for Poetry, in which he explained the necessity for poetry. He explained the role of the poet, the function of the poet, and throughout history, you've had such zealous people who cared a lot. Like, for example, John Keats. He got sick of tuberculosis, I think, when he was 24. Died when he was like 25, and he spent the last year or two. Um, he got sick, and he spent the last couple of years of his life just writing poetry. That's how much he cared about it. So even though people really, uh, even though people really had a lot of different ways of viewing poetry, or a lot of different opinions on why it existed, they still really cared. They had that thing in common. They really cared about it. They valued it in and of itself as a thing that they would pursue. And I think that is very. I'm not saying, well, it also happens a lot in other media. It's happened a lot in literature as a whole. I'm just using it as an example, as an older medium that has existed for thousands of years. But now we've had movies and shows and now video games. So a lot of the issues with video games are that a lot of, like, this, I'm just seeing the beginnings of this, and I don't want to name any people. I'm not gonna get a DMCA from Tony. It rhymes with Tony, and it's somewhere between Tony and Sonny. You got the money, Sonny? Yeah, Tony, I got your money. So yeah, so not to name any people, but a lot of this gaming industry, it's become an industry, and it's been sort of, I don't want to say infiltrated, but I'm going to say infiltrated. It's become infiltrated by people who don't really care about video games as a medium. They're not, like, they don't see it as a thing that they can advance, that they can improve, something that they can use to help entertain people, and sort of bring about these meet these natural purposes that art in that pertain to art. So and a lot of these people see gamers as a necessary evil. So I've heard this said before. It's like they don't really care what the gamers, they don't care about the gamer nation. But yeah, so the reason why I'm talking about this is because predominantly these people come from the writing scene. They come from the storytelling scene because they come from universities, and certain things happen there. But these what I believe that these people are doing is they come from a school of literature, which is the dominant culture right now, at least in the West, where where they do not see art as anything other than a means, or they primarily see art as a means of expressing themselves. So what this means is that they will put their own drives first, their own needs first, in many cases, agendas, ideological agendas, and this has sort of started to manifest itself in video games as well, and I think that it's making for a slightly worse medium. In a lot of cases, um, it's these people, because they wish to promote their own agenda, they take a lot of people who think like them and they hire them into these companies, and that is their primary purpose. It isn't to entertain or to deliver a good game or to or to sort of make games better as a whole. It is to advance something about themselves that they want to advance in the world, to express themselves. And this is, and so they end up getting people who aren't very talented, who just share their views. They can be their comrades. No, no. They're gonna be their comrades, and they're gonna join forces together to fight the system. So, but that's just to say that we're not about that. I'm not about that. I love gamers. I love the gamer nation, and I'm just one of those people who really care about creating something epic, creating something awesome, and doing it to the best of my ability. And I've got all this stuff working in the background, in the capacity of a writer and a linguist, where I examine the biology of language and the biology of stories. That is what I am super interested in, and I think that is very important to our culture. You gotta follow nature. First, follow nature. First, follow nature, and your judgment frame by her just standard, which is still the same, unerring nature, still divinely bright, one clear, unchanged, and universal light. So nature is clear, unchanged, and universal. So I can hear myself. Someone is playing the stream in the background. If you could just tone it down, just right. So this is Alexander Pope, an essay on criticism. He's really based. I love him. He's one of the greatest poets of all time. And right. So first, follow nature. Study that in university. It's cool. I like that. And right, actually, that stuff that I was talking about earlier has a lot to do with other things. All right, let's just move on. Enough negativity. Let's shoot down the negativity and move on to more epic things, such as stories, the uniqueness of video games when it comes to storytelling. So storytelling in video games is like there are it is a very different medium from movies and books and poems, and it's a lot of the times people try to make it look like a movie, or have a lot of cinematics that sometimes you can't skip them, when you just wanna slash some zombies or whatever. But um, but there are a lot of unique elements, unique devices used by video games in order to tell stories. And the first of which, the first of them is something that is not unique to video games, but it is found in every other medium, but because of its nature, whoops, because of its nature, it makes every single medium unique. So the first of them is the form, which creates a sort of a meta experience of the art form, wherein the form of the medium becomes part of the content. So it is done in such a way that it makes you sort of conscious that you are playing a game. It makes you conscious that you are reading a poem. It makes you conscious that the thing that you are doing is something that it sort of breaks the illusion, but it does it in such a way that the content of the thing, of the medium, sort of spills over into the real world. And excuse me, I don't know, I got a lot of issues today. Right, so the content sort of spills over into the real world, and one such thing that I would like to, one such game that I would like to refer to is Undertale. Now, I like Undertale. I think it's a nice game. It's a cute game, and the music was it's pretty epic, pretty memeable. So here you have some books that also sort of break that illusion. Gulliver's Travels is a book about a giant traveling around all these crazy lands, and it's told as like a retelling of a chronicle of some guy who then tells you about Gulliver, and that's sort of interesting. Then it's the what was it called? The Suffering of Young Werther. I don't know how you translate it. Maybe some of the nice German linguists in the chat, I know you're there, you're watching. Maybe you're gonna help us out. So, by the way, just feel free to comment anything you want in the chat, and later we're gonna read it. It's gonna be epic. We're gonna have some nice interactions. This is an interactive talk show, basically. Well, you get this nowhere else. Nobody else does this. So one of the games that does this in a way is Undertale, because there is a character called Sans who is sort of aware that the save feature exists, and that's sort of funny. But also the primary thing was when you were fighting this boss, one of these final bosses, and the game crashes, and when you start, it's different. It's like it loads up a different level. I'm not exactly sure how it was. But another really good example of this meta storytelling is Doki-Doki Literature Club. Now, I've actually played this game. It looks sort of weird. Like, why would you play this sort of game? But I just heard that it had a really big plot twist, and I wanted to play it. And it turns out that was true. And it's done in such a way that as something happens, if you haven't played it, you should check it out. If something happens in the game, the files themselves, the game files change. Some of them get deleted. And that's just, when I saw that, it was like mind blowing to me because I'd never thought of that before. I never thought it was even possible. I always thought that it was like, it was just, if you just deleted one thing about a game and then the whole game stops working. I don't know. I'm not a programmer. I don't know any of this stuff, but it's just, I thought it was a really cool thing. And it's something that games could do more in the future, because I'm sure there are many more creative ways, especially if you know your way around coding, to make this happen, to sort of integrate the 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 computer or the operating system or somehow the console. I don't know how you do it. I'm not into that sort of stuff, but as I've done it in poetry and in literature, I'm sure that it can be done also in many more ways in video games. So the next thing that I think that is pretty unique in video games is when you use the environment to tell the story. So video games are very unique from other media in that movies are sort of they're always the same. The frames are always the same. Everything that you see in the frame is already predetermined, and it just what you see is what you get. But in games, you can sort of run around a 3D space. You can move around, and sometimes things are completely different the second time than from the first time. And this makes for some really interesting experiences. Now here I have some examples. This is I don't know if you can see the arrow. Yeah, I think you can. So this is Max Payne. Max Payne is an older game, but I thought it was really cool. And in this level, this is the first level, what you do is you come out of this metro, this train, and you go up to this room. And I didn't want to show what's inside the room because I didn't know if YouTube was gonna strike down the channel, or I don't know, like take down the stream. But there's a lot of blood here on the other side of this door, and that's like the first thing that you experience that is well, in this level, that is that sort of tells you something is going on, something's going to happen. And I just think, because this is one of my favorite games, I think that this is a very interesting thing to observe when it comes to the environment. Another game is Bioshock Infinite. Bioshock Infinite is a really cool game. It looks really nice. I haven't finished it. I'm sorry. All right. I know you bought me the game, and I'm going to finish it eventually. All right. I like it. I really like it. It's cool. It looks cool, and it's fun. All right. I'm going to do it. But this game is, you first start in this city called Columbia, and everything in the city is animated. There are people in the background doing their own thing, and there are all these animations going on, and people just doing things that it's sort of like you don't have to look at them, you don't have to listen to them, but if you were to stop and listen to them, then you could get a bit about the world, you could understand a bit more about what's going on. And I think that's also a very interesting, unique way that developers can play on to create, to sort of deliver a story better. Another game was Deus Ex, another one of my favorite games, and it's there's this part where you meet all these homeless people, and it's supposed to be a future about augmentations, and people are robotically enhanced, and you think, well, this is going to be an epic future. This is going to be an awesome future. But then you see all these homeless people, and they're sick, they're starving, they're on drugs, and it doesn't have anything to do with the main story, but it sort of tells you about the world. It tells you about, well, it does have to do a bit with the main story, but it sort of creates that environment that sort of tells you something is amiss here before you even figure it out for yourself. And that's just one of the interesting aspects of video games that they can use to improve their storytelling, or maybe not improve, but rather do it in a way that is unique, that distinguishes them from other media, that sets them apart from books and movies, and it can sort of develop them even further than they are right now. Now that they're not developed, I think games are doing really well, although some people might disagree for various reasons. But right, so next we've got, I didn't I didn't have I didn't put up many examples for this one, but yeah, these are cool. These are cool games. I really like both of these games. This is Portal 2. So in Portal 2, there's this gel, and this makes you, like, the orange gel makes you move faster. The blue gel makes you bounce off of it, and the I don't know, the white gel makes you able to create portals, and it's just a cool mechanic in the game, but it's also used as a story element. So as these gels get introduced, you sort of discover about the world. You discover about the the guy who created them, what his personality was, and I think that was an interesting way of sort of introducing mechanics and also using them as something that gets the gamer gripped and makes them care about, like, who created this, what caused these gels to happen. Another thing was, what I just thought it was really cool in Warcraft 3. There's this guy called Arthas, and he is a paladin. So he has these spells that are, so every hero or every character has these spells or abilities, and he is a paladin, so he has these healing spells, these protecting spells, a spell that resurrects the dead and turns them, that gives them life again, makes them alive. So when he falls and he turns from a human paladin to an undead death knight, his spells turn into undead versions of them. So they could have just done whatever. They could have just given them completely different spells, but they chose to do sort of like the reverse of the spells that he already had. So instead of healing, his spell does damage, and then does damage to living units and heals undead units. And he instead of protecting, he has this. Instead of using a shield to protect himself, he has this spell to kill a friendly creature and eat it for its life force. So, and just that sort of stuff was just really cool. I thought it was really awesome, and that's sort of like an interesting thing that people can play on to use the mechanics that the game already offers and implement them into some sort of a story, to sort of explain them or incorporate them somehow. And I think it's very cool. So another thing that I really, really like, and I think that this is sort of in the inception, we're sort of in the inception of this, is when stories are told in such a way that you have the capacity to impact a world or a world that is already happening, like some things that would happen whether or not you interacted with them, and the outcome of those would depend on how you chose to interact with them, or if you didn't choose to interact with them. So I think one interesting example of this is the Total War series, and the Total War is really cool. I really like Total War, and it's sort of like it sort of has all these factions that have relationships with one another, and they interact with one another regardless of what you do. So, for example, if you chose to leave those people over there alone, they would still go to war with one another. They would still try to conquer each other's cities. They would still try to raise armies or whatever. And this is something that we're trying to do in our game Sonder. So um, it's like the resources are very limited, and that's why we can't do this on a massive scale. But the principle is still the same, that the character or the entity will still perform actions and will still have a performative role in the game, in the story, regardless of whether or not you interacted with them. So, for example, there's a character in Sonder, the game that I'm helping make, that is going to be awesome. And you have a character, for example, Debelio, who would sort of get up from cryosleep and do all these things, just do certain things in the story, and choose to do various things. And you could choose to ignore him, or you could choose to interact with him, or you could choose how to interact with him, and that will impact the relationship. That will impact how things get done in the story. But imagine if this were done with multiple characters. Imagine if this were done with 5, 6, 7 characters who are all having interactions between themselves, between each other, and then you can choose to just move on and do something else, or you could choose to interact with them and participate in their interactions, or you could choose to interact with other people but leave one group alone and they would do their own thing. Like, imagine the possibilities of this way of doing things, which this isn't possible in any other medium. It's not possible in books, in movies, in any of those. And so imagine the possibilities. The reason we're not doing that right now is because resources are just so limited. We don't have a lot of time. And when you're a small studio, you can only do so much. But if we were to I guess have a successful game, if we were to have like a first episode that's successful, or the entire game, if Sonder does well, we could maybe potentially be able to do things on a much larger scale, to do this sort of really like cool thing. Like, just, isn't that so awesome and unique and interesting? And it sort of reminds me of Westworld. Have you seen Westworld? That's a really cool show. So people go into this Wild West area, and like an amusement park, and these robots are programmed to act a certain way, and then you can choose to interact with them. But if you don't, they're just gonna keep doing their own thing. And I think that's sort of something that we're going for, something that has the capacity to happen within Sonder. Right. So, by the way, I hope that you have any other suggestions, any things that you've got, any examples maybe you can give us of unique of things that are unique to games that cannot be replicated in other media, that or maybe something really interesting about games that you like. So feel free to share that in the comments. And we're just gonna read the chat now. Before we get into that, I would like to ask you what would you like to talk about next week? Um, so would you like to talk about um, would you like to talk about transforming or adapting stories from video games to movies and vice versa, like adaptations, stories that, or IPs, or I guess franchises, you want to use business terms, that move back and forth from and to video games and movies and books? Or would you like to talk about using other media in games, like using I don't know, movies or books in video games as a sort of supplementary material? Or would you like me to sort of go further into the functions and purpose of art and stories and video games? So leave a comment, or leave your opinion in the chat. What you want to do next week? I don't know what's going on there. I'm sorry. So let's move on to our chat. Let's see what you guys are saying. Um, let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Right. So Victoria Blairska is saying sound is okay. Well, I'm glad the sound is okay because I've been talking all this time, and I would hope that it's been going okay all this time. We can hear you, Downey Studios. Yes, thank you that you can hear me, and thank you for saying that you can hear me. I'm glad that you can. Victoria says, I use my hair to express myself. Well, some of us have other uses for our hair, and some of us don't really use our hair for anything. But I'm glad that you found a purpose, and I'm glad that you have something that works for you. Doki-Doki, no, Downey Studios. Downey Studios, I told you about this game, and yes. Victoria Blaska says, the sorrows of young Werther. Werther. I don't know. Yeah, well, thank you, German linguist. That is the translation. And she also says, but German linguistics are used to being ignored. Well, we don't ignore German linguistics. We are German linguistics respecters here. So you got to get your say, and you will always have a voice. Downey Studios says, yes, Bioshock. I agree, Bioshock. It's going to be great when I play it, and I'm looking forward to that. Victoria says, Debelio. Yes, Debelio, it's an awesome name, and if you don't like it, then you're Buford. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. It's for those of you who don't know, Debelio means the fat guy in. I'm kidding. It doesn't mean that, YouTube. I'm kidding. We don't do any of that here. We are respecters. All we do is respect. It's all about that respect. Right. So Victoria Blaska says, another cool thing about games, it can simulate your perspective, so you can genuinely peer around a corner and get a surprise. This is really good for horror games. Yes, I agree, because you can sort of feel for the character more if you can control them, especially if it's first-person game. And I think this is really done well in a few video games where you play as the guy, plays the character, and you just there's no way of you there's no way for you to know what's behind the corner, so you have to sort of go through the thing that you're meant to go through. And I think that is a really good point. It's a unique way of having horror, and I know that you like horror, but a lot of people also like horror, and they should give video games a chance if they haven't played them already. Play Amnesia, play I guess what were some good horror games? I don't know. I personally don't get scared, but I guess Alan Wake is good. It's not first person, but it's a really interesting game. Um, yeah. Also, the only Downey Studios says the only game to movie adaptation I can think of is Hitman. What others are there? Yeah. So, by the way, give us your opinion on whether you want next week if you want to talk about let's see about adaptations of games, or about using other media in video games, or about the function of art and stories in video games. Or we could do a combination of all three, but I don't want to go too long. I sort of want to make it a little bit shorter. I don't want to. Right. So other movie adaptations are Warcraft, which is really good. I thought it was, well, not really good. It was decent. The problem with it was that it was too, it was too childish. It was a bit. It wasn't dark enough, and it felt like it was just having all these things that people recognize. Oh, look, there's an orc. Oh, look, that armor looks just like a human armor. And instead of just having an interesting story, just why don't you have Blizzard? Why didn't you have the people who made your cinematics also make the movie? The cinematics were awesome, and well, not the new ones. The old ones were really good, and another adaptation is Assassin's Creed. Um, Assassin's Creed, man, I don't want to. It sucks. That one sucks. Let's just we'll talk about this next time if you want to. Um, right. Victoria says, "No, the Belio is the best." Yes, the Belio is sure, of course. I guess it's the best. You can play as the Belio. How about that? You buy the game and you play as the Belio. um, she says layers of fear. Layers of fear. Whoops. Having a little bit of technical difficulties. I tugged on the wire a little too hard. What can I say? I got the epic zoomer energy. So right. Fear, Silent Hill, Layers of Fear. Yes, those are all good, interesting horror games. And we don't have a lot of engagement today, I guess. So we're gonna. Okay. So would you like to do anything about these topics that I mentioned, or maybe you would like to have them all together? Maybe have them in a more concise way. Let's see what you think. Just Downey Studios says today was largely about poetry, so yeah, I'd like to hear about how some the other mediums are compared to video. Can I do this? Oh yes, I can actually show your comment. Yes, this is cool. All right, so yes, I talked a lot about poetry, which is I should probably just rename the stream to poetry, but I thought that it was it connects very well to the principle of the thing, to the point, the main point that I was trying to make about the importance of defining stories. And I guess I focused a little bit on the negative aspects that we see today, but yeah, let's just can we can we just get back to the right? All right, just to me, we're looking at these awesome pictures of the ship. You want me to show you this cool picture? Let me show you this cool picture of the game, or like where is it? Where is it? Um, is it this one? No, no. Where is it? Yes, this one. All right. Uh, so check this out. Check out this picture from the game from Sonder. It's really cool. You got the ship. You got a little bit of space there. Wait, I got an even cooler one. Let's see. Or was it? No. Yeah, this one. No, not that. Right. I just. Right. Check this out. This is really cool. You got like I think this feeling is really awesome when you just have all this emptiness here, and then you got a little bit here, so it's not all empty. It's space, it's vast, it's empty, and then you have this, and well, what do you know? It's not empty after all. So I just thought that was this is a really cool shot, and if you want, if that makes you interested about the game, so a really good way to sort of make this sort of story happen is to support the game, buy the game, and you can buy it. You can buy the new episodes as they come out, and eventually we get to this point where we got all these resources, and we got this setup where we got a potential to sell even more, so that we can afford to invest more. Then we're going to have some really, really amazing things that nobody's seen before. These unique things that, man, I don't know. I have no idea. I must have eaten something. Right. So Downey Studio says, and adaptations are great too. Okay, so maybe we'll do a little bit of the adaptation thing. Whoa, there I am. Yes, here you are. And you're going to stay here for the rest of the stream because we're about to end it. And thank you for joining us. And maybe, I don't know, I think this one went well. I think this one went better than the last time. I felt a bit more comfortable. I felt a bit more into the zone. And I'm in my element. When I talk about stories, I'm just in it to win it. And right, so I think the next week is probably gonna be even better. Today we had some visual visual supplements, and yeah. So, oh, Downey Studio says, "What an honor!" Whoops, what an honor! Yes, it is an honor for us that you joined us, epic viewers, awesome audience, and you did amazing, Martin. Well, thank you. Oh, thank you. I really did do amazing. Yeah, so I think we're going to call it a show. Thanks so much for watching. We had a great time. This is very fun. And we'll see you next Friday at 5 p.m. Greenwich time +1. Greenwich +1. So see you then. Bye-bye. Okay, bye.